Ever get that urge to dive into some techie stuff?
Yeah.
Something that seems, at first glance, a little overkill. Today, we're talking Proxmox, a seriously powerful virtualization platform. Usually you hear about it for, like, managing tons of virtual machines, right?
Right.
But what about when you only need one? Just one VM. Is Proxmox still the way to go, or is that, like, way overkill?
Yeah, you're right. People often think of Proxmox for those massive server setups.
Right.
It's easy to see why someone would say, why bother with all that if you only need one VM?
Exactly. And I bet a lot of you listening are in the same boat. You want a server for something specific, maybe a home lab, maybe a small business setup.
Yeah.
And one virtual machine seems like plenty.
Sure.
But here's the thing. Proxmox has some pretty awesome advantages even then, even in a single VM setup. So imagine this. You're doing a major software update. Something goes wrong, and boom, total system meltdown.
It's happened to the best of us.
Oh, tell me about it. But with Proxmox Dot, you can hit the rewind button. Literally.
Yeah.
You can go back to a snapshot of your VM from before the update went south. No more spending hours, days even, trying to unbreak things.
Wow.
It's like a safety net for your entire server. A time machine, almost.
I like that. That's a good way to put it. That's what's so powerful about it, even with just one VM. Takes the stress out of server management, especially for someone who's just starting out.
It's about peace of mind, right?
Exactly.
And speaking of making things easier, backups. Those are essential, but man, they can be a pain to manage.
For sure, absolutely. And Proxmox has you covered there, too. It makes the whole backup and recovery process so much smoother. You can automate them, schedule them. It's all about, making your life easier.
Nice, nice.
And then there's Proxmox Backup Server, PBS.
PBS, okay, yeah. I've heard of it. Vaguely rings a bell. But I haven't actually had a chance to really dig into it.
Well, it takes backups to a whole new level, let me tell you.
Yeah.
It uses something called deduplication, so it basically only stores the changes since your last backup.
Oh, wow.
Huge space saver, makes those backups super fast.
Okay, see, that kind of stuff makes me rethink the whole overkill thing. But, okay, let's say you start with one VM today. Everything's going great. What happens if you want to add something new down the line? A new service, maybe, or like a dedicated media server alongside your main system. How does Proxmox handle that kind of growth?
And that's really where Proxmox shines, because it's built for virtualization. Adding more VMs is a breeze.
Okay.
You can even use these lightweight containers. They're called LXCs if you want to get really fancy.
So you're not stuck with your current needs, right? Proxmox can grow with you as your server ambitions expand.
Exactly, and that's something you just don't get with bare metal. You're locked into that one configuration, very limiting in the long run. With Proxmox, sky's the limit, really.
This is all sounding pretty great, but I'm going to say I do have one concern, and I bet some of you listening are thinking the same thing. Doesn't all this virtualization stuff, doesn't it slow your server down?
I see what you mean.
I mean, you have Proxmox running, then you've got the virtual machine on top of that.
Yeah, it's a common misconception, actually. In the past, virtualization could be pretty resource heavy, but Proxmox uses KVM, and that changes things.
KVM. Okay, there's an acronym I haven't heard in a while.
Right.
Refresh my memory.
So KVM.it stands for kernel-based virtual machine.
Okay.
Basically, it means your VM talks directly to your hardware, makes it crazy efficient.
Interesting.
Think of it like this. Instead of running your VM in its own little guest environment,
right,
it's more like directly integrated with your system.
So it's less like those Russian nesting dolls I was picturing earlier. And more like a direct line, less overhead, smoother performance, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And that means minimal impact on your server's performance overall. Honestly, for most home users, small business uses, you'd barely notice a difference compared to running everything on bare metal.
Okay, that is reassuring.
Yeah.
But let's say the performance hit is tiny, basically nothing. Isn't there still a trade-off when it comes to, like, complexity? I mean, Proxmox has all these cool features, but it's got to be more complicated than just installing, an operating system directly on my server, right?
You're not wrong. There is a learning curve. Proxmox is definitely more involved than bare metal, yeah.
Right.
But don't let that scare you off. Proxmox actually has a very user-friendly interface, and the documentation is excellent.
Oh, okay.
They've really tried to make it accessible, even if you're not, like, a Linux expert.
So you're saying I don't need to be a command line wizard to get Proxmox up and running?
Not at all. It helps to have some basic server knowledge, of course, but with a little effort, anyone can figure out Proxmox, and the payoff is huge. Think about it. You get the peace of mind, the flexibility, that future-proofing we talked about.
Right.
Plus, you learn some really valuable skills along the way.
It's an investment,
Yeah,
right? Not just in your setup, but in yourself. I like that.
exactly.
So to bring it back to our original question, is Proxmox overkill for just one virtual machine?
It might seem that way at first,
Yeah.
but when you consider those long-term benefits, it becomes clear that Proxmox can be a real game changer, even for smaller setups.
You're basically getting all the tools, all the features of a professional grade platform without needing a massive server farm to justify it.
Exactly.
What would you say to someone who's still on the fence? Someone who's listening to this and thinking, I don't know. It's like you're getting the keys to a high-performance car.
Right.
Even if right now you're just using it to, run errands around town.
Yeah.
But you've got that power, you've got that potential right there at your fingertips.
Exactly. And sometimes, having those extra capabilities, it can open up possibilities you hadn't even thought about.
Yeah?
Maybe you start playing around with different operating systems.
Right.
Or you try out containerization. Proxmox gives you the freedom to explore, to learn new stuff without having to rebuild your whole server from scratch.
You remove those limitations?
Yeah,
Definitely lowers the barrier to entry for, trying new things.
totally.
At the beginning of this, I'll admit, I had my doubts. Proxmox for just one VM seemed like a lot. But you've made a really compelling case.
Well, it comes down to what you want out of your server, right? If you're looking for the absolute simplest solution, you're never going to need more than that one VM, then yeah, maybe Proxmox is, a bit much.
I guess so, yeah.
But if you want that reliability, that flexibility, the ability to just easily recover if something goes wrong.
And who doesn't want that?
Exactly. Then Proxmox starts to look like a really smart choice, even for a small setup.
It's about thinking long-term, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about the headaches it could save you down the line.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I gotta say, this has been a real eye-opener. So for anyone listening who, like me, thought Proxmox was just for these huge enterprise-level setups, hopefully this has given you a fresh perspective.
I hope so.
It's a lot more approachable than it seems at first glance. And, it could be a lot more beneficial than you'd think, even if you're only running one VM.
Absolutely. And remember, the Proxmox community is great. Tons of resources online, really helpful people.
Right.
You're never really on your own.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. And who knows, maybe we'll do a follow-up at some point, dig into some of those more advanced Proxmox features.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
But until then, happy virtualizing, everyone.